On the day Serafina gave birth to the child of her terminally ill first love, her father-in-law and mother-in-law had 10 thugs stationed outside the delivery room. But even when the delivery was over, Alaric never caused any trouble. Her mother-in-law held Serafina's hand and sighed. "Serafina, don't worry. As long as we're here, we won't let him get anywhere near you. Your dad even brought people to guard the hospital entrance. If he dares try to stop you from giving birth, we'll call the police." Serafina, pale and weak, nodded slightly, but still instinctively glanced toward the elevator. What she saw was nothing but emptiness, and only then did she let out a sigh of relief. She couldn't understand it. All Alaric had wanted was to help her leave a legacy for her true love. Why couldn't he just understand her? Looking at the nurse holding the crying baby in her arms, she smiled contentedly. She thought that if Alaric could visit her tomorrow, maybe she would forgive him for all their previous arguments. She'd even let him become the child's father. But what she didn't know was that Alaric had just submitted his report to the United Nations. 7 days later, he would give up his nationality, become a stateless doctor, and never return. The day Serafina left the confinement center, Alaric had just finished his shift at the hospital. As he approached the door, he could hear sounds of laughter and joy from inside. "This child is so beautiful. Her big eyes are definitely her father's best trait." Her mother-in-law was happily playing with the baby in her arms, while Kaylin came out of the kitchen with a steaming bowl of chicken soup. "I made the soup myself. You're still weak. You need to nourish your body." He sat beside Serafina on the bed, gently feeding her, creating an atmosphere of warmth and family. Her father-in-law was holding a rattle, laughing so much his mouth couldn't close. "This child is really likable, just like her father. Fortunately, it's not that silent Alaric. Otherwise, having a dad who's a doctor would be such a headache." Alaric's hand gripped the door handle tightly. He remembered when he first met his father-in-law. He patted him on the shoulder and said that being a doctor was an honor for the whole family, saving lives and healing the wounded. He also told him that he was once a doctor himself, and if it hadn't been for an injury from a medical dispute, he wouldn't have retired early. But now he was saying that doctors didn't deserve a family. Alaric had only taken a year off for further studies, and this family had already become completely intolerant of him. He lowered his head bitterly, tugging at the corners of his mouth. He had been married to Serafina for 3 years. She had always said she didn't want children, and Alaric understood that giving birth could be life-threatening, so he never pressured her. He still remembered the day he left for his studies abroad. She cried her eyes out, saying she would miss him. They had talked every day since, sharing their lives. Even their colleagues joked that despite being married for 3 years, they still acted like a young couple in love. But 1 month ago, when Alaric finally took a leave to come back home, he found Serafina with a big belly, standing next to her first love. His thoughts were interrupted by Kaylin's voice. "Alaric, when did you get back? Why are you just standing at the door?" Hearing him, the others in the room also turned their attention toward the entrance. When Alaric's father-in-law saw the resignation letter in his hand, his frown deepened. "How did I ever let you marry my daughter? What a disaster. Now you're quitting your job? Are you planning on living off us old folks? Is this how you're supposed to be a husband?" His mother-in-law joined in the criticism. "You quit your job? You couldn't even keep your golden job, and now you're asking what you're going to do? If you don't work, how will this family survive? Serafina's health is fragile, and the baby needs money. Are you going to let the 3 of us starve?" Alaric couldn't help but find this amusing. Whoever's wife and child it is, it's their responsibility to support them. "Alaric, what did you say? Don't you have any sense of responsibility?" Serafina finally couldn't take it anymore. With red eyes, she shouted at him, and in her agitation, she clutched her chest and coughed violently. "If Kaylin hadn't saved me from the car accident 3 years ago, I would have died long ago. His parents both died, and now he's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Soon no one will remember him. Why do you always target him? Do you think I'm that dirty, vile woman in your heart?" Kaylin looked at her with a heart full of pain, soothing her as he turned his gaze toward Alaric. "Alaric, you should say less. I know this is all my fault. I promise I'll never show up in your life again, but please don't let me affect your relationship with Serafina, all right?" Alaric looked at the 4 of them united against him, and he felt even more amused. So this was what a real family looked like. Just then, Serafina spoke up, her voice cold and stern. "Alaric, my patience has limits. If you ever target Kaylin again, don't bother coming back to this house. If you want to stay married to me, you'd better be quiet. Next week, at the full moon celebration, I'll announce in front of our relatives and friends that you are the father of the child. Next week, Alaric glanced at the baby already fast asleep in the stroller. By then, he would be on his way abroad. But before he left, he didn't mind giving them an unforgettable surprise. Without changing his expression, he nodded. Okay. After saying that, he didn't care about their reactions. He turned around and went straight back to the bedroom to pack his things. Since he had decided to leave for good, he didn't want to leave any trace behind. The laughter and joy from the living room filtered through the door, and his hands froze for a moment as he folded his clothes. Kaylin, I want to use your surname for this child. That way, even if he calls someone else dad in the future, he'll always remember that you're his true father. Even though Alaric couldn't see it with his own eyes, he could easily imagine the deep affection on Serafina's face when she said this, and his heart was already torn apart, full of wounds. He suddenly thought about the day he rushed back home last month, still holding a souvenir for Serafina that he had bought abroad. But when he reached the door, he saw Serafina and Kaylin just back from a walk, hand in hand. While Serafina's face was filled with fear, Kaylin looked at Alaric confused, asking if he had come to the wrong door. Alaric didn't say a word. His gaze was fixed on Serafina's bulging pregnant belly. He had been away for 11 months, and yet his wife was pregnant. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't deceive himself into thinking that this child could be his. It wasn't until Serafina hurriedly stepped in front of Kaylin, introducing them. This is my husband, Alaric, that he thought Kaylin would back off after hearing this. But instead, like the man of the house, he invited Alaric to come in and sit. As they brushed past each other, he whispered just loud enough for only them two to hear. I heard you're quite a bit older than me. Then I'll call you Big Brother, since the child in your wife's belly is mine. Alaric's chest burned with fury, and he couldn't hold back anymore. He punched him hard in the face. He completely lost his rationality. The longing from the 11 months he had been apart from Serafina transformed into pure rage. If he had a knife in his hand, he might have actually killed this pair of dogs. The neighbors heard the commotion and called the police. They were all taken to the station, but since it was a domestic matter, the police couldn't interfere and let them return home. As soon as they arrived, his in-laws rushed over after hearing the news. They didn't ask a single question and immediately began yelling at him. They scolded him for causing such a scene and embarrassing them in front of the neighbors. They yelled at him for wasting all those years of education, that he should never have raised a hand against anyone. If anything happened, they would never let him off the hook. It turned out that they had known about Serafina and Kaylin all along and had even supported their relationship. In just a year, Kaylin had become the perfect son-in-law in their eyes. Meanwhile, Alaric had been kept in the dark. He felt nothing but bitterness, his heart heavy with pain. Serafina shakily walked over to him, trying to take his hand and persuade him. I never meant to betray you. Kaylin is in poor health, and the doctor says he only has 6 months to live. I couldn't bear to see him die without a legacy. I thought about talking to you about it before, but you were abroad, and I didn't want to trouble you or delay your studies, so I decided to wait until you came back to discuss it. If you're willing, could we raise this child together? Having a child was such a huge decision, but it sounded so casual coming from her. Alaric packed the last of his clothes into the suitcase just as his mother-in-law pushed the door open. She saw the suitcase at his feet, wearing a look of forced politeness. Since you've been gone, I've let Kaylin sleep in your room. Now the study has been turned into a nursery. Tonight, you'll have to make do and sleep in the living room, or you could stay at a hotel. Alaric was truly exhausted and didn't have the energy to look for a hotel. He nodded, preparing to settle on the couch for the night. But in the dead of night, the sound of a baby crying echoed from the bedroom. He rolled over, ready to put in earplugs, but then he heard Serafina's complaint. You need to do something about the baby, or he'll just keep crying. You're my baby, just take care of it. Let the kid cry a little longer, it helps with lung development. Serafina lightly laughed and said, You're so annoying. Then came the sounds of the bed creaking. Alaric pulled the blanket over his head, trying hard to ignore those unbearable noises. But as soon as he closed his eyes, Serafina's image from when she first confessed to him flashed in his mind. She had been so pure and beautiful, with her heart and eyes filled only with him. But that version of her no longer belonged to him. She frowned tightly, her eyes filled with contempt as she looked at him. What's there to introduce? He chose to quit a good job as a doctor. Now, even if he starves on the streets, he doesn't deserve anyone's sympathy. Alaric, you really have no sense of responsibility. Do you think this will make me give up on the child? Alaric looked at her familiar face, but at that moment, it felt so alien to him. He remembered when they first got married and he considered resigning and changing careers due to internal competition at the hospital. Serafina had simply held him in her arms, gently patting his back and whispered in his ear, "We are one. No matter what decision you make, I'll support you. Resigning isn't a big deal. I believe our future will shine, and husband, I'll always be by your side." But the person who promised to always be by his side now stood by, letting another man humiliate him. She seemed to have forgotten the words she once said to him, forgotten the deep feelings they once shared. Even his in-laws were shaking their heads in disappointment. I must have been blind before. How could I have trusted you to take care of my daughter's future happiness? Luckily, we're still alive. If we weren't here, I can't imagine how you would have tortured our daughter when we're gone. They went on, exaggerating their words, and the passers-by started to glance over at them. Alaric's hands, hanging by his sides, slowly clenched into fists. Just as he was about to speak, Kaylin suddenly stepped forward. "We're going to take a family portrait. Alaric, why don't you join us? In the future, I'll rely on you to help take care of Serafina and the child." Serafina immediately interrupted him with a disdainful sneer. "Look at his shabby appearance. If he's in the photo, it'll only lower our family's image." She then turned her head and headed toward the photography studio, urging Kaylin to follow quickly. "Since that's the case, we'll leave first. Don't let us delay you from finding a job." Kaylin gave Alaric a meaningful pat on the shoulder. Watching him leave, Alaric felt no emotion stirring inside him anymore. To outsiders, this was such a harmonious family. If this was what Serafina wanted, then what was wrong with him stepping aside and letting go? 3 days before his departure, Alaric received a message from the director. He said that the expert Alaric had asked him to contact for him was in the country attending a forum and could help check his father-in-law's coronary artery disease. His father-in-law had always had heart problems, and several years ago, he was even rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. So while Alaric was abroad, he had asked his colleagues to help gather some relevant case studies for him. After all, the bond of years was still there. Once he helped with this, he would owe them nothing. But when his father-in-law heard that Alaric wanted to take him to the hospital, his face instantly darkened. "Why go to the hospital? Do you wish for me to drop dead? I had heart bypass surgery, and it was successful. What's there to check? There's a top heart specialist in the country today. You could go see him, maybe do some preventative measures for the future." Before Alaric could finish, his father-in-law smashed his water cup at him. "You're the only one who knows how to sweet talk. Do you think you can just call up a top expert as an unemployed person? All you do is boast. Do you remember Kaylin? He stayed up late just to help me book an appointment with an expert. Where were you then?" He kept comparing Alaric to Kaylin, and his attitude made everything clear. No matter what Alaric did, it was wrong. No matter how he tried, it would never measure up to Kaylin. When this thought crossed Alaric's mind, he could only bitterly smile. "Since you don't want to go, forget it. Let it be. It was just me meddling in things that didn't concern me." Soon, it was the day of the baby's full moon celebration. Alaric arrived late and saw the banquet hall filled with relatives whose names he couldn't even remember. For a moment, he felt dazed. This scene was even grander than his own wedding with Serafina, and right at the entrance to the banquet hall, they had posted a family portrait of the 5 of them. As for Alaric, from beginning to end, he was just a joke. When relatives and friends saw him walk in, they immediately started whispering, and even without hearing them, he could guess what they were saying. Soon, his aunt grabbed his arm and greeted him. "Alaric, when did you come back? Serafina didn't mention it at all. I heard you just came back from studying abroad and are about to be promoted to chief physician at the hospital. Your future looks so bright." Alaric didn't respond, only nodding slightly in polite acknowledgement. He could clearly see the disdain in their eyes. After all, he wasn't in the family portrait, and the person who had been with Serafina the entire time wasn't him either. Someone nearby who seemed to be in the know pointed at the man feeding Serafina dessert and asked, "Alaric, who's this guy? I didn't know you had a younger brother." Alaric gave a faint smile. Serafina's new husband. The ants, who were all for gossip, immediately widened their eyes and then huddled together, whispering even more. Since Serafina's family didn't care, why should Alaric help them cover up the truth? At that moment, Serafina walked up to the stage and took the microphone. I'm so happy that everyone could join us for my son's full moon celebration. Before this, I never thought I would become a mother. I always felt like I couldn't play the role of a mother successfully. But the moment I heard my baby crying in the delivery room, I realized how powerful a mother's love really is. Her words were impassioned, as if she were about to cry from her own emotions. Alaric's aunt, standing next to him, yelled, "Let the father of the baby say a few words." Where's the father? The atmosphere in the banquet hall froze for a moment. All eyes shifted back and forth between Kaelin and Alaric. The answer was already clear, but his aunt seemed to be waiting for Serafina to admit it herself. Alaric met Serafina's gaze and slowly walked up to the stage. With a stunned look on her face, he took the microphone from her hand. "What are you doing? I warn you, don't say anything reckless, otherwise we're not done." Panic flashed in her eyes as she pulled at his sleeve and whispered a warning. But Alaric didn't even glance at her and pulled his hand away. If she hadn't done anything wrong, why would she be afraid of him knocking on the door of truth? At the same time, Alaric spoke calmly into the microphone. "First, I want to thank everyone for coming to today's full moon celebration. The relatives here are the ones who saw Serafina and me enter the marriage hall together. After our wedding, I always cherished your blessings. But as you came in earlier, you must have seen the family portrait at the door." Hearing this, Serafina's face immediately changed. She scowled and rushed toward him, trying to snatch the microphone away. Alaric swiftly dodged and gripped the microphone tighter, continuing to be honest. "I was shocked when I saw it too. But what shocked me even more was that after spending a year abroad, I came back to find my childless wife was already 8 months pregnant. I can't swallow this. Serafina, let's get a divorce." He pulled out the divorce agreement that had been prepared long ago and threw it forcefully at Serafina's feet. This was something he had been wanting to do ever since he saw her getting close to Kaelin. Serafina's face turned ashen. She tried to take the microphone to control the chaotic atmosphere, but at the same time, she reached out to grab Alaric's arm, wanting to explain things to him. "Alaric, why can't you just let it go? Haven't I told you as long as you stop bringing it up, we three can live a good life together from now on?" 3 people. In her version of the 3-person family, Alaric was the one who wasn't welcome, and honestly, he didn't want to deceive himself any longer. "Sign it. There's nothing more to say between us. I wish you both happiness." Serafina shook her head vigorously. "I won't sign it. I don't agree to the divorce." "Alaric, don't even think about it." When Alaric first contacted the lawyer to draft the divorce agreement, the lawyer had told him that he could ask Serafina to leave with nothing. After all, she had openly had a child with another man during their marriage. This was the perfect evidence of infidelity. But gathering evidence and waiting for a court ruling would take too long. Alaric was about to leave the country, and no matter how much money he had, there was nowhere he could spend it. So he simply took the share of the property that rightfully belonged to him and entrusted the lawyer to donate everything to the Hope schools in the mountainous regions. After he left, there was nothing more to discuss with Serafina. Alaric glanced at the chaotic scene and turned to leave. But Serafina, unwilling to accept it, handed the child over to her father-in-law and was about to chase after him. However, before she could take more than a few steps, Kaelin suddenly clutched his chest and gasped for air. "Serafina, I feel terrible. Maybe it's from all the stress earlier. I think I'm really close to dying." "Kaelin, are you all right? Hold on, I'll take you to the hospital right now." She could only watch as Alaric walked away with firm steps, thinking to herself that once all this was over, she'd have a proper conversation with him. As long as she didn't agree to the divorce, their relationship would never truly end. With that thought, Serafina felt a little more at ease. The group hurriedly rushed Kaelin to the hospital, but on the way there, Serafina's father seemed to have a sudden increase in heart rate due to the emotional stress. Serafina nearly cried in panic, unsure who to comfort first. Just as her father was about to be wheeled into the operating room, they ran into the director and the most authoritative heart specialist in the field. At that moment, Serafina didn't care about anything else. She rushed forward and knelt in front of the director. "Please save my father. His condition is really critical. There was a man named Kalen who previously helped me get an appointment with you. Do you remember him? The expert looked at Serafina for a long while before cautiously. You're Alaric's wife, right? He contacted me through the director earlier, hoping I could help check on his father-in-law's condition. I saw your photo on his phone, and I even praised him for being so filial. But I remember he told me a couple of days ago that it was no longer necessary to check. So what's the situation now? Upon hearing this, Serafina froze, her eyes filled with confusion and shock. They had always believed Alaric couldn't contact top-tier doctors, assuming everything was done by Kalen. But now they realized they had misunderstood him all along. In that instant, Serafina didn't know what to say. The director pulled her aside and with a look of regret said, I'm very sorry, Miss Serafina. We're about to board a flight to the US for a conference, so we can't participate in the surgery. But rest assured, our medical team is the best in the city, and we'll do everything we can to save your father. After speaking, both of them left one after the other. Alaric later heard from the director about what happened. Serafina knelt outside the operating room, and her mother, filled with regret, scolded her. I always said, even if Alaric was shameless, he wouldn't joke about things like this. You didn't believe me, and now look. If anything happens to your father, you'll be the one responsible. Her furious yelling made the baby in her arms cry out loudly. Her mother-in-law angrily placed the child on a plastic chair nearby. Stop crying. You cry all day long. If I didn't know any better, I'd think I gave birth to a little emperor. But Serafina was no longer paying attention. She slowly pulled out her phone, wanting to call Alaric. Perhaps now he was the only one who could contact the expert for her father's surgery. But her call wouldn't go through. By then, Alaric was already on a plane heading abroad. He rested his head against the window, watching as the scenery outside gradually proceeded until the force of inertia lifted the plane into the blue sky. He felt an odd sense of unreality. From this moment on, he no longer had a nationality. He was dedicating himself to the world. After more than 10 hours of flying, his companion and he were exhausted when they finally landed. The scene here was in stark contrast to the peaceful atmosphere in China. The place was filled with war and armed forces, and one wrong move could cost a life. While they rested in the car, their team leader began explaining the situation at their destination. The team leader handed each of them a gun. Saving lives is important, he said, but more important than the mission itself is your own life. Those words hit Alaric hard. He thought about his years with Serafina, how he once put her above everything, even his own life. When they reached the site, the road was muddy and chaotic. People sat injured on the ground, blood staining their limbs. He learned that there had just been a bombing. These people, the ones whose wounds they could see, were actually the lucky ones. They had survived. The operating room was full, so they had to lie here exposed. Alaric pushed everything else out of his mind and started working, bandaging wounds. It was just the beginning. Every day over the next few months reshaped his entire worldview. But more than that, it cemented his resolve. He never once regretted coming here. He never regretted becoming a doctor without borders. Then one afternoon, a colleague came in out of breath. Someone's looking for you, he said, a woman. I think she's from back home. Alaric's steps faltered. Serafina's face flashed through his mind. Before he could say anything, she walked in. Alaric, it's really you. Her eyes were red as she ran up to him and hugged him. He could feel her tears against his neck. He gently pushed her away. He remembered the message from the lawyer just before he boarded the plane. Their divorce was officially filed. Whether she agreed or not, in a month, it would be finalized. Serafina, Alaric said calmly, we're already divorced. After you left, a lot happened. My father, he passed away. Alaric froze. That he hadn't expected. I'm so sorry. We didn't believe you, she cried. We thought you were lying. But the one who lied was Kalen. He never arranged to meet any specialist. My father's condition was ignored. If we had listened to you, maybe he would still be alive. She crouched to the ground, covering her face and crying. Something stirred in Alaric. He had seen so much death here. He thought he'd grown numb. But this still hit him. I'm sorry, Alaric. I didn't know you became a doctor without borders. I didn't understand why you left. Please come back with me. It's too dangerous here. I've already lost my father. I can't lose you too. No, Alaric said firmly. I'm not going back. I don't belong to any one place anymore. Not until the war ends. Not until the world doesn't need me. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have lied. Kalen is very sick. The doctor said he doesn't have much time. Alaric, how am I supposed to live with the child? You promised you'd always protect me. Alaric pulled his hand away from hers. We're divorced now, Serafina. Your life is yours. I have things to do. It's dangerous here. You should leave. He turned away. If you don't go back, then I won't either. I'll stay here until you're done, and we'll go back together. Alaric didn't respond, but just then, he heard her answer her phone. Kalen is dead. I'm coming back right now. You must wait for me. Then came the roar of 2 bombers overhead. Instinct took over. Alaric tackled Serafina to the ground. Alaric, are you crazy? She screamed, but the explosions drowned her voice out. Dust and rubble flew around them. Alaric raised his head, scanned the area, then helped her up. We need to get to cover. Her lips trembled. Am I going to die here? I'll have the team leader arrange for you to leave. Don't come back. Soon, a local driver arrived with an old pickup truck. Alaric slipped a few bills into his phone case. Make sure she gets to the airport safely. She didn't say a word as she climbed in. Alaric gave a faint smile. Back at the camp, a colleague approached. Was that your girlfriend? She came all this way. That's love. Mine dumped me as soon as I said I was going abroad. He paused. Why didn't she go back with you? She's not my girlfriend, Alaric said. She's my ex-wife. He fell silent. 2 years later, Alaric returned home. His understanding of medicine had deepened, and this time, he wasn't alone. His girlfriend, a woman he met at the camp, was with him. She had disfigured herself once to protect him. He had promised to care for her forever. At the airport, the director of Central Hospital came to greet him. You've gotten darker and thinner. These 2 years must have been hard. His ordinary words choked Alaric up. He embraced him. Then Alaric saw Serafina. She stood in the distance, holding a little boy's hand. She had changed, worn out, not the bright, confident woman he once knew. She didn't come over. She just stood there. His girlfriend took his hand. Is that your ex-wife? Should we say hi? Alaric shook his head. There's nothing to say. Since that banquet, their paths had split. There was no going back. As they drove off, Alaric received a message from Serafina. He hadn't used a domestic number for 2 years, so he never got her texts. This one said only, I'm sorry. He stared at the screen, then blocked her and tossed the broken SIM card out the window, casting away every piece of misplaced affection and regret with it.